Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Chris in Central Pennsylvania. Yesterday, I traveled 22nd of March 2026 to Maryland on the outskirts of the District of Columbia to visit South African refugees. What I discovered there is a bit concerning, or disconcerting, I should say. I've been getting reports from all over the country of recent arrivals of South African refugees who've told me that they've been coerced into signing leases, one-year leases in most cases, for apartments that they've been put into. Oftentimes, the first time I heard this in person was in Rochester, New York. When a refugee arrived, they were taken after an exhausting 17 hours to Atlanta, then a layover, getting your bags, getting through immigration, dealing with USCIS, getting moved on to your next destination, and finally arriving 24 hours, sometimes 36 or 48 hours, depending on where people are coming from and where they went through, whether it's Europe or straight to the States. These folks are coming to America and they're being told they must sign a lease for a place, or they'll be blacklisted and they'll be kicked out and they'll be removed from the program. Okay, first off, these are demonstrative lies. Any refugee case officer that tells you you'll be blacklisted most likely is committing a crime. Now, I'm going to offer this advice to South African refugees who are coming to America. What you need to do the moment you find out what state you're going to is you need to go online. Google will be your friend. Look up renters' rights for the state you're going to. Most states have a Bill of Rights or something that protects renters from abuse by landlords. And in this case, be abused by refugee case officers who are not doing their job. You cannot be coerced into signing a lease. When you arrive and you're exhausted, you're dealing with 2- and 3-year-olds that are, fussy because they've had a long trip and they're hungry and you're exhausted and they're like, we're going to put you in the street if you don't sign this lease. That's coercion. And to me, that smacks of a criminal act. Not an attorney, but perhaps we should consult some attorneys on this issue. But the bottom line here is, while the country is obsessing about Nick Shirley's layering centers in Minneapolis and fraud in California, we're uncovering a far bigger problem that's been going on for decades, not just for a decade, but for decades, of refugee abuse, those who've come to America. And as I've said in the past, it seems to have only come to light because South Africans arrived here, and some of us actually have paid attention to what's going on and care about their welfare. As a consequence, they've been notifying us about the maltreatment that some of them are receiving. Now, the good news, in my experience thus far, is this is a small percentage of South African refugees who come here. I would estimate, of those I've been in contact with, just now over 1,200 of the refugees, that the figure is somewhere at 3% or less. Nonetheless, the abuse or maltreatment or coercion of a single refugee is not appropriate, and it violates the spirit, if not the law, of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1980, which is meant to bring people over here. Under that act, since 1980, over 2.7 million refugees have come to this country. With the South Africans coming over here now, we're uncovering massive abuse for some of these folks, and it's unacceptable. It's not acceptable. We cannot tolerate this. We as taxpayers are funding this, whether we like it or not, and whether we like it or not isn't germane. The fact that we do it, we must provide the succor and refuge, hence refugee, that our nation offers. So I've uncovered several more cases. I met with over 20 South African refugees at a housing complex in Maryland yesterday, and of the over 20 that I met, at least 2 or 3 raised their hands and said they were told they would be blacklisted if they didn't sign a lease the moment they arrived. So what I recommend to any South African refugees is the moment you discover where you're supposed to be going, which state, you go online and look up what rights you have so you're informed and you arrive. If they try to browbeat you into signing a lease, don't go for it. Now, here's the options. If you come here and they've found accommodation for you and you find it unacceptable when you arrive, which is your right, then they need to take you to a hotel. Now, that will eat through your refugee cash assistance, the money the grants are given to you. It will do that. But the first mission should be to get a social security number, get an appointment for that, and then go look at apartments from that time. That is the responsibility of your case officer to help you with those appointments and to help you find a place to live. I'm discovering either lazy or malfeasant actors here amongst refugee case officers. A small number, but once again, after saying good things about Church World Service, again, I find horrible conduct by Church World Service case officers, presuming the people spoke to me were telling the truth. Now, as a professional investigator and former federal law enforcement official, I don't just take people at their word. There's a lot more to the conversation before it lends credibility to what's being said. And what I can say is what I learned yesterday has credibility, and it's deeply concerning. I will inform the Office of Refugee Resettlement about this situation in Maryland, as I promised to do, and hopefully we'll see some movement on this. But you have rights. You don't have to just take whatever crap is shoveled your way. And if you're being treated in such a way, there is a mechanism that's being developed that's now available that you can contact the Office of Refugee Resettlement to report what's been happening to you. Now, having said that, We don't need Karens out there who just, spaz out about the smallest little thing, complaining and moaning that they've been mistreated. We're talking about genuine cases of mistreatment, of which, fortunately, there aren't a high percentage of them. However, when you arrive after 24, 36 hours of travel from a foreign country, you've got little kids, you're exhausted, and someone says to you, if you don't sign this lease, you're going to be blacklisted, that's a criminal act. They're not allowed to pull that. And you should be able to report that to somebody. So we're on this case while Nick Shirley's busy running around fighting Laring centers. Well done for him. Lucky that people are actually watching his content. Hopefully people will discover this problem that's going on. And the question is, how long has it been going on? I mean, South Africans understand English and come from what used to be a first world country. So they know how things are supposed to work, even if it's a distant memory. But people coming from Myanmar or from the Congo or from Kyrgyzstan, places that are broken, places where there's no rule of law, places where, pillaging and murder and fleeing from war happen. Many of those people are simply just glad to be here and grateful that they have arrived here and nothing's happening to them. So they don't open their mouth, or they're concerned they're going to be blacklisted because they believe it. You cannot blacklist people. That's not allowed. That is unacceptable. This has to be looked into and researched. And this coercion of refugees into signing leases is not acceptable. Not acceptable. Now, having said that, refugees aren't entitled to, South Fork from Dallas. You don't get a 7-bedroom mansion. But yesterday, I was made aware of the following. A 38-year-old man sharing a bedroom with an 11-year-old girl and a 15 or 16-year-old boy. Okay, first off, the 38-year-old man in that room, that's unacceptable. But the refugees had no choice. 3 different cases were stuck in the same apartment. Either 7 or 9 people in that place. 3 different cases, the 3-bedroom. They dumped them all in the same place. That's unacceptable. It's against the law to put a teenage boy and a teenage girl in the same bedroom. You can't do that. You can't do that. Government quarters for the military, that's not allowed. They have to move to larger quarters when kids turn a certain age. And putting an adult in that room is unacceptable. That is not acceptable. In addition to that, I have a case where a refugee signed a contract for a 2-bedroom, and then without that refugee's consent, they moved another refugee unrelated to that person, not even linked to their case, into the same apartment without their consent, had that person sign a lease in addition and put the first renter's name on the lease, but didn't have the first renter sign it. And then they brought a 3rd person into the same apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, stuck a bed in the living room, and that person now has to deal with neighbors who come over and do laundry because they share the laundry facilities in her personal space. This is not acceptable. This violates basic decency. And in fact, in many ways, probably violates Maryland law. But then I'm not a practicing attorney in the state of Maryland, so we'll have to consult one. But these abuses should not be tolerated and should not be allowed. Given the reduction in the volume of refugees from 100,000+ in fiscal year 2024 to just a handful in 2025, about 25,000, including those from around the world, a few South Africans, and now this year only 3,158 through February, that's a dramatic reduction number of refugees. Therefore, the refugee case officers are not overburdened. They shouldn't be overburdened. These agencies should be able to handle this, and they should be able to find accommodation for these people. We're not looking for accommodation for 100,000+ people. Plus, the number of legal immigrants to America has dropped precipitously as well. This is a serious case that's problematic, and the world needs to know. I will tell you this much. The Office of Refugee Resettlement will be aware of these cases this week, and hopefully they'll be able to take action on this and find out what's going on. But you have rights. You cannot be coerced into signing a lease. Just remember that, and don't be taken advantage of.